Hello, everyone. We are very glad that you joined us. This is Todd and my pilot. I'm just the co-pilot. My pilot, Toya. We're coming from to you from Black Spaces Incorporated. So, how you been doing, Toya?
I've been doing well and wishing the same for you.
Well, thank you much. Thank you much. So we always have great fun talking about sci-fi and giving our unique critiques of sci-fi. And so now we're going to talk about the Star Trek Discovery series. As you know, the series has wrapped up with its final season, its fifth season, there's a lot to discuss about it. But of course, Toya and I will give our unique critique. So, Toya, getting right into Star Trek Discovery, what were your general impressions? Where did it leave you in terms of the general storyline, and what's your general sense of it or rating, if you will, in terms of Discovery?
I really enjoyed it. I love the journey. I love that the series allowed us to fall in love with these characters, to grow with them, to see them through difficult times. I love the fact that it ended on a high note. I like that even characters that we didn't particularly care for initially,
Mm-hmm.
we grew to like them.
Mm-hmm.
Very I mean, Star Trek has a storied history of having really good captains, and I would say Michael Burnham is in the top for me, at least top three.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I agree. With your assessment about Discovery, and there's a lot to be said about how Star Trek, has sort of these captain figures who are central, but there's also always a very strong sort of cast that accompanies the captain. You love Mr. In the broad lower Star Trek, you love Mr. Spock or Dr. McCoy as much as you love Captain Kirk, maybe even a little more sometimes. So you're right. In the same vein, there was a lot to chew on with regards to Discovery. I love that interaction, particularly between Saru and Michael Burnham. That he was this beautiful, gentle soul, could get fierce when he needed to. The tendrils would flare when he needed to, but was this wise, gentle soul, and as coupled with her learning and growing to become captain. And so in that regard, I agree. What did you think about sort of Michael's Burnham's development by the end of the show, her growth throughout the series? Because in some ways, and we'll talk more about it, but by the end, we came to understand why the show was called Discovery. Or we
Right.
we really began to understand the show as being as Discovery. So, what would you think of her development from sort of this rebellious ensign, or actually, if we want to go all the way back to her being, raised as this foster child of Sarek,
Hmm.
as a Vulcan, to and Spock being her stepbrother, to her sort of mutiny, to her becoming, a storied captain and virtually admiral. So, what did you think of it all?
I think it was very authentic. I think that her story was one that could really take place anywhere where you have someone who had a adolescent where they felt out of place. They didn't really find themselves in a space that was welcoming to them because she was not accepted on
Mm-hmm.
Vulcan.
Mm-hmm.
She
Right.
had this misplaced sense of rebellion, this bravado of trying to prove herself by being the most badass person
That's right.
and not really realizing that in order to be a leader, you have to listen and you have to follow sometimes. You have
Right.
to
Right.
not basically abandon what you think is best, but sometimes you need to listen to better counsel. I
Mm-hmm.
love the fact that we saw her make mistakes. We saw her sort of be the kind of person that pays for her mistakes, not like totally that she can't come back from it, but she learned from her mistakes,
Mm-hmm.
which is something that we don't often see in basic Star Trek captains and characters. You know, you saw her fail. You saw her have to deal with difficult people, and sometimes she was just as difficult, if not more. But
Hmm.
I love the fact that we sort of grew with her. And so that when you see at the very end, when she and Booker run off together, and
Hmm.
then you see what they ended up with after they ran off together,
That's right.
you know, the commitment is a true full circle. I really appreciate it because we don't see that across the board in any type of drama, more or less a science fiction drama.
I absolutely agree. And in particular, I mean, we're going to get into our unique critique, fans, because Toya and I are lovers of sci-fi and things all related to sci-fi, but we give our unique critique that you don't get out there elsewhere. So that's why you should like and subscribe, by the way, this channel, and give us, show us some love, because we love you. Um, yeah, I agree that this, from the contentious relationship with her mom, and the whole question of the Red Angel, and that mystery that unfolded, to her initial sort of love affair. You saw the ways in which she was trying to balance this role between being a member of Starfleet, being an officer within a star, ship, and having love relationships, whether they be with other Starfleet officers, and the tension or conflict there, versus having with this unconventional relationship with this guy who is a, I would say, well, I wouldn't, I was trying to say whether or not Booker's character was a kind, gentle Han Solo. That's probably not quite right, but
Swashbuckling.
but there's a little bit of swashbuckling aspect about him, although there's some more depth there with Cleveland Booker. And then also this wonderful relationship, of course, initially with Christopher Pike, but then later on with Captain Philippa and Michelle Yeoh, which you just gotta love Michelle Yeoh.
Right.
And so that it took us in this alternate timeline that Star Trek loves to do. It moved us ahead. How many was it? 500 years at least, or 700
Yeah.
years? Into this alternate timeline, and it gave a whole new universe of problems that Starfleet had to overcome with regards to, the loss of warp drive capability, and how did they regain it, and how to rebuild Starfleet. So there's just a lot here that to unpack in that regard. So what do you think in terms of Discovery's contribution to Star Trek lore? What does it do to kind of advance the story of Star Trek, the saga of Star Trek?
I think it makes it more relevant. I think that the way that they address the relationship among the member planets, as
Mm-hmm.
well as the relationship that Starfleet had to deal with those that didn't join the Federation, but
Mm-hmm.
they still have to exist. I think the way that they handled the sort of disillusion of I'm sorry, about the Federation when they flash forward and they
That's
were
right.
that one lone person
Right.
that had been waiting for someone in a sense to come relieve them, and
Mm-hmm.
see how it built itself back up to accomplish what it was meant to accomplish. So
Right.
I think it fit into the lore just right because it gave an opportunity so that we didn't see the stylized version of the Federation that we've seen in previous um, products and programs. So I think it really helped it.
Yeah, in some ways, Toya, I'm always wondering, well, what are they going to do to have another opportunity to have another iteration of those fly uniforms that they always have in Star Trek? It's like, okay, well, where the epaulets going to go now? And is it going to, what's the fashion forward they're going to do?
Right.
Because there seems like there's many iterations of the Starfleet uniform as there are planets in the Federation. So,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, I think even with this, and I'll talk about that, but with this latest development with the Breen Empire and sort of the central question around this technology of the progenitors. I actually think that what what Discovery has done is parallel that very poignant final episode of Picard,
Mm.
the Picard series. I didn't know that Picard series, in particular in those final episode, was going to take me there and make me boohoo and cry and snot.
Oh.
Because it was such a touching. You knew that these actors, who Patrick Stewart and LeVar Burton and various other folks, Jonathan Frakes, these are actors in their prime. These are folks in their 60s and their 70s ish. And so it's not likely that they're going to be taking on yet other roles within the Star Trek universe per se. Was their swan song. And so, but to see it all kind of come together, including Whoopi Goldberg's character of Guinan, it was really quite touching. And so, in the same way, I think they said with Martin Green's character and with the whole universe of folk and the very sort of tight knit family, because the captain described it as corrected and I'm gonna call it what it is. Then of Star Trek movie 5. Woo! That's that movie. Oh my. And I don't mean to bash the great William Shatner, but he directed that travesty of The Final Frontier, where among the various plot elements, the crew, the crew goes to the Great Barrier of the galaxy or the universe, I forget exactly where, and they meet God. I'm like, okay, how they gonna pull this off? Well,
Right.
I think with the progenitors, they did it in a much more subtle way of saying these are, and even the progenitors it conceded, you consider us progenitors, but we gained this technology from someone even more ancient than us.
Right.
And so it left it open to say, it was a blending of spirituality and science. It's like, well, was the original source the Almighty, or what? Well, what was?
Right.
I know, some who are not in faith may chafe at that. But what was the original source of the technology that created these worlds and created life, right? And so, in the same way, it's taken that strain. It was also from Spock and the Genesis
Right.
seed, So using that same sort of thread in a very innovative way to talk about the progenitors of the of life in the galaxy or in the universe, I guess. So anyway, I think it corrected that sin. That's what I'll say. And I'm all for correcting sins in Star Trek. Okay, so let's get to our unique critique, Toya, although we can get into other things. What did you think? What's your unique critique, particularly about the portrayal of blackness in Star Trek, and how does Star Trek Discovery move us forward, or not, in terms of the portrayal of blackness in sci-fi and the portrayal of blackness in the Star Trek lore altogether?
I think it went forward in leaps and bounds. I've
Okay.
never seen such authentic representation of Black culture
Oh
in
yeah.
all of its diversity.
Oh yeah.
I think the easy thing to point to was the hairstyles,
That's right.
because no matter what was going on,
Mm-hmm.
she kept a hairstyle.
Oh
And
yeah.
she kept hairstyle that were reflective of her culture
Right.
as a Black woman. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
whether it was a shortcut, the braids,
Mm-hmm.
um, that she wore in many different styles. I think
Right.
even the way that she and Booker interacted, it seemed very authentic.
Mm-hmm.
I think to sort of expand not only African American culture, but I think that the culture that was represented by other members of like Latino races.
That's true.
Um,
True.
you had, and I forget the two characters that was on the bridge, the
Okay.
engineer
Right. Mm-hmm.
and I guess both of them were engineers, the
Okay,
pilot and the engineer. I mean, you saw a black man and a black woman
that's right. Mm-hmm.
doing their job and doing it well
Right,
and being fierce, not necessarily leaving themselves at the door when they report to duty. And
right.
I think that it felt nice. And I like the way that everyone seemed to represent the diversity of the diaspora,
Yes,
even if they're 10,000 light years in space.
that's right. That's right. I think yeah, this is the first time in some respects, in some regards, that a show represented not just sort of African American culture. I fully agree, but sort of the Black diasporic culture, right? And you had and so and true for Star Trek, represented in names. It was I'm going to mess it up, but a Lieutenant Joanne Wosaku, uh,
Hmm.
and I mean, and played, in fact, by an actor of African descent, and then of course David Ajala. Um, but again, through the physicality, as well as directly from the physical representation, as well as name and some aspects to culture. And Wilson Cruz being a Latino man, who I do believe he embraces aspects of Afro Latino culture as
Hmm.
well.
Hmm.
So I think in that regard, it's sort of the blending of that broader diaspora, just beyond again, among just beyond African American aspects of that diaspora.
Hmm.
What else sort of? Well, let me add to that point that you made, and say this, that the now what I find really intriguing. Did you catch this in the last episode? And I mean, I gotta go back and look and see where there was this display. But there was this display that, if I'm not mistaken, and fans, you can correct me again, subscribe and like. You
Yes.
can correct me, fans. But I thought that somewhere in the display, maybe on the admiral's home within her display cabinet, there was a communicator earpiece
Oh,
representing Uhuru, a baseball representing Ben Sisko, and a visor representing Lieutenant LaForge. There was a direct sort
I'm
of
gonna have to go back and
reference
look.
to that Black legacy of Star Trek. And I thought that was just like so touching and so brilliant to sort of say, here's the folk who have gone on before me.
Yes.
I'm adding to the canon of Blackness in Star Trek. And fans, if ever you want to ask yourself the question, well, Star Trek, what do you mean? Just type in Google Black characters in Star Trek, and you'll get a whole
Right.
panoply of individuals, a constellation of
Right.
individuals who served as captains, as admirals, and
Hmm.
other roles that were prominent individuals all within Star Trek. And so in some ways, Star Trek, more than nearly any other more than any other mainline sci-fi franchise I can think of, has
Hmm.
explicitly referenced sort of that Black characterization in sci-fi. And of course, it starts with the great Nichelle Nichols, who started that legacy, way back when, with
Right.
the original Star Trek series. So anyway, I just thought I would point that out. Now, there is also, of course, that difficulty, Toya, that folk talk about. Well, why didn't the Black captains start off as Black captains? Because Cisco started off as a commander or commodore or whatever, and of course, Burnham was ensign, then first officer, then da 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 da. So I guess that's a fair critique.
But I think that if we had met her and the captain's chair, then I honestly don't think we would have been as invested in her story,
Okay.
because it would have been she's already where she wants to be. So
Mm-hmm.
I think having us see her journey to get there
Mm-hmm.
made it more valid, made us more connected, more invested in her being successful.
Okay.
You know.
Yep. I understand. I understand. Yeah, I agree. Again, I think in just the whole span of things. And we can think of other cameos, like Stacey Abrams showing up
Mm,
as the president of
of the
the
world.
of the world. Like, yeah, Georgia didn't get right and elect her governor, but she
Right.
became president of the world. So, all right, I'm not. I will say we're still nonpartisan on the show, but anyway. But yeah, to me, you're right. It was a significant development, in terms of, the arc of her character. What about the other unique critique about love and representations of love, and particularly, of LGBTQ folks, of queer folk, and non binary individuals on this show, which I think is yet another leap forward, if you will, for Star Trek. What are your thoughts in that regard?
I really like the fact that it seemed every letter of the alphabet was represented. You
Mm-hmm.
had Tignataro's character,
Mm-hmm.
and it wasn't a big deal that
Right.
she had been married to, I want to just say, a female identified individual,
Mm-hmm.
and that she was able to recognize that, yeah, they were married, and now, circumstances happened that they were no longer married. You
Mm-hmm.
have the gay dads
Mm-hmm.
adopting the non-binary child,
That's right.
and that
Mm-hmm.
whole scene
Mm-hmm.
where they were going off for the adventure, and their parents were worried, like, yeah, one parent who didn't want to let go,
Right.
and one parent's like, yeah, let them go,
Mm-hmm.
and you had everyone didn't bat an eye. It
Uh-huh.
was comfortable. It was accepted. It was just another day. And
Right.
you had characters that you wondered about the orientation,
Right.
but then that didn't detract from them being a crew member.
Mm-hmm.
I think that, of course, Black love was represented where you had Michael and Booker. You saw them through. You saw them. Describe the meet cute. You
Mm-hmm.
just, you see them having their relationship.
Mm-hmm.
You see them separating. I think the scene where Michael had to confront him at the library, where she had to
That's
admit
right.
her fear of
Right.
messing it up,
Right.
and then you see the happily ever after where they ran off, and the fact that you see he was respectful, wasn't like he was, questioning, how are you going to leave the house and leave me here?
Right. Right. Right.
I think
Mm-hmm.
that was necessary. I think it was needed. I honestly don't recall ever seeing that type of diversity represented in any TV program. I mean, it's
Right.
sad to say that we have to wait to a futuristic show to
Right.
see everyone coexisting,
Right.
that we can't imagine that in our reality. But
Right.
it was there. I mean, everyone had a chance to see themselves,
Right.
you know.
Right. And that's a very, and again, I come back to some of the progenitors, if you will, of the shows. That's a very Gene Roddenberry thing, and the Gene Roddenberry ethic is ultimately, can't we all get along, right? And
Right,
so
right.
that's so envisioning this future utopia to give us lessons about what do we need to do to get there, even given the bumps, the conflicts, the crises that will occur in human affairs. What do we need to do to get there, to have a future, such as this one? And I like the fact that the show took the you know some might say, well, it was an easy thing for Booker and for Michael to end up in love and married and creating a family. Not really, because
Mhm.
you know, due to, I mean, it also was a portrayal of black pain. He lost his entire planet, and
Right.
then out of anguish out of anguish, decided to collude with,
Mhm.
a not so great guy in order to destroy the very thing that Starfleet says, well, no, don't.
Right.
That's violating our prime directive, our prime values. So he was in her eyes until they could reconcile. Well, you
Mhm.
on the outs, you
Right.
considered a traitor, to Star Trek. And so,
Mhm.
but in that sense, she said, well, I'm not going to, and I think that episode where she is kind of confronting who she is in that library in order
Mhm.
to get the clues to the progenitor's technology. That was a sort of that was really kind of quite deep. I almost, my big nerdy brain, or not so big, but nerdy brain, went to like, that's aspects of double consciousness and other stuff going on there of her having to think and reflect upon herself as to who am I, and what have I always challenged myself, you can't but help. Have I always been challenged as a Black woman in these instances, and can I be my genuine self and authentic self, and be captain and be admiral? Yeah. So, all right. So, any final thoughts in that regard, Toya? Uh,
So enjoyed the season. I so enjoyed getting to know the characters. Um, I wish they wasn't the end of the series. I wish they just
yeah,
could have went on some more adventures.
yeah.
But I think if you have to end a series, I like the warmness of that final voyage on the ship and her communicating with Zora, and Zora be like, I won't see you after this. Like we're basically
Fully agree. I fully agree. And my hope always with any great drama, but particularly with the show.
yes, definitely.
We like the show. Let's fly.
Yes, yes, and I
You
love
knew
that
that
was
was
her
gonna be her
catchphrase.
last line, right, Toy?
Yes, you like wait for it, like, but if you're gonna have that as your, yeah, it worked on
Yeah.
so many levels.
If she had said engaged, I'm like, wait a minute. Wrong
Too
show.
much of a tie-in, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, fans. So this has been our unique critique and our opportunity to share with you our thoughts about the Star Trek, Discovery saga. We want to invite you to subscribe and to like our channel, to like this particular video, to give us some love, because we definitely love you, and we have other things that are going to be coming up. And so stay tuned with Black Spaces. Toya hadn't gotten rid of me and or gotten tired of me yet. so so
Never
I
that.
I appreciate her, love her, that every time I say, well, Toya, you want to talk? Sure, why not?
Yes.
what not? Why not? Why not? Okay, so thanks for joining us. And as we say here on Black Spaces, because I sound like Don Cornelius, catch you on the backhand side,
Yes.
catch you on the black hand side, and in the future. All righty. Bye-bye.